What is the domain and range? Well, let's first start off by making a graph. And this graph will be a hyperbola. With the equation y equals 1 over x. So just a standard hyperbola. What would be the domain and what would be the range? Well, when we look at domain, we go from left to the right. And when we look at range, we go from bottom to top. Okay? So, coming from this way, we can see that x comes from negative infinity. This is negative infinity this way, and this is positive infinity this way. So it comes from negative infinity, and it stops at x equals 0. It never actually approaches x equals 0, because this is the asymptote along here. So we can say that x exists with this symbol right there. X exists between negative infinity to 0, and we write it with a parentheses to show that we never actually get to 0. It's just before 0. And then we can also put union 0 again, but not actually 0. This is after 0. This is greater than 0. To positive infinity over here. So that's the domain. These are all the possible x values that can be used in this. And for the range now, so from bottom to top, we see that y comes from negative infinity down here because of this arrow, and it goes to 0, but never actually equals 0. It's just before and just after 0. So y exists between negative infinity but less than 0 and greater than 0 to infinity, which is up here. So that's the domain and range of this hyperbola. Let's make a new graph, this time of a parabola. It's going to be so this is -4 and 4. This is where it intercepts on the x-axis, and the y-intercept is -4. So what would be the domain and the range of this parabola. Let's start with the domain. So from left to right, you can see that there's an arrow over here, so x is going infinitely up and this way. So if we were to come from this way, the possible x values would be negative infinity, so x exists between negative infinity and these intercepts here, they don't really matter for this domain, so yeah, don't include them. So infinity, negative infinity comes through here and it just goes infinitely up and this way. So it just goes from negative infinity to positive infinity. So those are all the possible x values, there's just an infinite number. But for the range it's different. There's no arrows going this way down to the bottom. So we can see that the lowest y value is going to be -4. It starts here. So we're going to go from -4. This time we're using square brackets. These sharp ones, the brackets. Because this time it equals -4. Before it was parentheses because it never actually touched, but the square brackets means that it's equal. Okay, so -4 all the way to infinity, because there's an infinite number of y values going up, and that's the domain and range of this parabola.